Thank you. So leadership is the big issue we're going to be talking about on this panel. There was a lot of energy and dynamism here at the Green Festival from innovators, artists, policymakers, etc., etc. But how can this sort of bottom-up energy be channeled into meaningful change by leaders, whether it's in the field of politics, business, or activism? Gina, let me start with you. It's a presidential year like no other for many different reasons, and we'll get into some of that later on. But you joined the Biden White House in 2021 and were part of some of the huge climate actions that have been taken since then. The IRA is probably the most consequential piece of climate legislation ever passed in this country. It was designed to create jobs for American workers, to reinvigorate the American economy, and yet the Biden administration is not getting credit for it. It doesn't seem to be resonating. Why is that?
Actually, it's resonating in the marketplace because it's working. The Inflation Reduction Act now has generated about $370 billion in private sector investment. We're talking about almost 600 new projects. We're talking about 300,000 jobs. So it's working. It's done its job. But keep in mind that this was a 10-year bill. So these benefits continue for another 8 years. So we are really just getting started. And one of the ways I really recognized that this was going to be a big deal was when, after we actually passed the legislation, we immediately found the EU and others squawking about it as being protectionist. That's when I knew we had something here. Right. But instead of continuing with that discussion, they started to pass their own legislation that was very similar. So it has developed a partnership opportunity that I think is leading to the public and private sector beginning to understand that if we're going to tackle a challenge as large as climate change, we have to partner together.
But it does have, consequential acts like this have a long time horizon, but those time horizons are much shorter than the electoral cycle. So, it is sort of part of the job of leadership to communicate and to explain that to people. Why do you think that doesn't seem to have worked?
I think that if you look at this, and one of the reasons why I'm doing work with America is All In, is subnationals know what's going on. People in communities that see these benefits know what's going on. And so I'm really not concerned with the time horizon. I'm concerned with people seeing that there is an opportunity to address climate change in a way that's going to benefit them. Not ask for sacrifice, not ask for them to give anything up, but it's going to make their lives better. And frankly, it's going to clean up our air and keep people healthier. That's what matters to me. And I think that's what matters to the general public.
Now, Sage, you're a young activist. And, we were talking earlier that, on a similar point, this message about climate and the need to act on climate doesn't seem to be landing with people, in your opinion. Why do you think that is? And what needs to be done about it?
I think it's less about not landing. I think the majority of people at this point understand that climate change is a problem, but they're still under-equipped for solving it. If you ask the average person what is their understanding of climate solutions, they're probably going to say electric vehicles. They might say something like recycling, which is not a climate solution. We still haven't reached the general public with an understanding of what realistic next steps look like outside of solar panels, wind turbines, electric vehicles. It really is an incredibly dynamic system change that we need, not just in our energy system, but in our economy, in our food system, and we can't solve problems we don't understand. There was a recent report from LinkedIn that said that Gen Z is so under-equipped Gen Z is so underskilled in sustainability that we actually pose a threat to climate progress. The reason for that is that we are exactly as skilled as the generations before us. There's just not the training out there that we need. So our higher education institutions, which, proportionately are churning out our future decision makers in government and in the private sector, are still failing to deliver a real systems thinking, framework for how to solve climate change so that we can go and address that in our careers. I'm the director of an organization called Sustainable and Just Future. Our work is in making climate solutions a curriculum priority in U.S. universities because we're trying to fill this gap. I think it really, thank you. Thank you. But yeah, you know, we are the first generation to grow up feeling the effects of climate change. We have a massive fire season. So many of us have, you know, from a very young age, either lost homes, have friends who lost their homes to whether it's disasters, floods. And so I don't think it's a lack of caring. It's a lack of skills and knowledge.
And people are feeling overwhelmed by the scale of all the different things that need to be done.
Right. You know, when you go, I mean, this was my experience when I was an undergraduate at Berkeley. I was taking the environmental curriculum there, and I looked around at everyone, and I was like, so we all have depression? Because it was so focused on, you know, understanding the nuances of the problem and how bad the problem is, it felt like there was nothing that could be done. So I went out and actually started looking for an understanding for myself of what the solutions were in all these different intersections. And so I started teaching when I was 19 at Berkeley, and that program is called Solutions for a Sustainable and Just Future, so the nonprofit. It's a shortening of that. And that is the largest student-led class Berkeley has ever had. We have had thousands of students go through that program, and we always have like really heavy wait lists, and it's because there's such a demand from young people for these kinds of things.
Can I ask you a question about activist tactics? So I live in London, and you know, in the UK, these very sort of confrontational climate activist groups like Just Stop Oil, Extinction Rebellion have been making headlines now for a long time. You know,
right.
Throwing soup at painting, at very, very valuable paintings, spray painting, breaking into airports and spray painting private jets, blocking freeways. And their point is nothing else is working. This might be annoying. You might feel like we're in your face about this, but this is the only way we can find to shake people out of their sort of complacency. What do you think about that form of confrontational activism?
I've been asked before whether or not I would condemn their tactics. I absolutely won't. I do think that there needs to be a set of standards in the climate space for, what interventions we're taking. So blocking freeways and blocking the working class is not going to reach people in the way we want to. But spray painting private jets and throwing soup on paintings, it works.
Yeah.
It gets the headlines we need, it gets the attention we need, and it's inconveniencing the very richest people in a small way too. Someone asked me about oh, well, the slashing of tires, and I'm like, well, they have 20 cars to choose from. So, yeah, I think that we need a variety of tactics. We need people working on this from the private sector, from education, from in government policy, but I think that the power of direct action and activism is really powerful.
Now, Melanie, we've talked about policy, we've talked about activism. You have moved from the policy world to the business world. In terms of the difference you can make, what are sort of the biggest differences between the two universes that you've experienced?
And I actually started my career in the nonprofit space as well. And so I think the biggest differences between all of these, well, first and foremost is where they're all aligned, which is they're all focused around driving transformative change, whether it's advocacy or government or corporation, and using their perches in the economy to do that. And that's, for me, moving from government to corporate world. The thing that's been the same has been getting to work, one, with incredible people. So wherever I've been, it's been people that are mission aligned, that are driven and focused around sustainability, and that's what remains the same. I think the differences have been, frankly, where you can drive that impact and how you scale that impact, which coalitions you're part of. In the corporate sector, we get to align with other corporations and drive impact at scale through procurement. When we line up around whether it's procuring around sustainable aviation fuel, looking for low carbon cement, low carbon steel, or low carbon chips that we put into data centers, that kind of scalable procurement is a key area where you could see even greater volume of change that can happen when you move from a government to corporations and when you partner together in that space and deliver an outsized impact.
And big corporations, can really sort of set the agenda and change what people think. So Tesla's the obvious example. Tesla has proven that you can that electric cars are a real thing, and they've literally transformed the entire industry. However, at the same time, big companies can disappoint and demotivate when they're caught doing greenwashing, and there is, a lot of people are skeptical about some of the big sustainability claims made by big corporations. How do you cut through the noise of that cynicism?
I think is first is being as transparent as possible, being really clear-eyed exactly what methodologies you use to make those claims, what data you're using, where the sources of data you're pulling forward, and publishing that. I mean, whether it's, as one of the largest corporate buyers of carbon dioxide removal, and we've published 3 white papers that go into great detail on which contracts we sign, which companies we work with, the methodologies we're applying to each of that work. And we're doing that across the board in all the different areas. I think transparency is such a key part. It helps define what you're for, what you're doing, and the work you're trying to put in place to meet your commitments. And for us, that's to be carbon negative, water positive, a zero waste company that protects ecosystems by 2030. And we put out a report every year saying where we're making progress, but also where are the areas we need to focus.
So you alluded earlier to carbon offsets, and of course Microsoft this week announced a big deal with Occidental, I think the biggest ever deal for direct air capture. And carbon offsets have had a very bad press over the last few years. What is the case for the defense, I guess, for those sorts of carbon offsets?
First is going to be, I think Sage made a good point, definitions and education. I was on a panel earlier today that they talked about, I think the line there was not all sustainable aviation fuels are the same, not all offsets are the same. And so first and foremost is really demonstrating, even within direct air capture or carbon capture, you have a wide range of what's there. So first for me is really defining what is an offset, what offsets are we backing and what are we for. For instance, we haven't done any avoided deforestation offsets in the last year's accounting, or for several years in fact. So that I think is a key area to think. But these are things where it's about definitions. I think one of the challenges we see is the word offset is a single word, but defines a wide range from dollars spent for that offset, the ease of actually acquiring that offset, to the suppliers of the market for that offset. So I think, when you say bad press, I'd love to just double click into that and, which category, which sector received the bad press versus, frankly, there's lots of great projects. There's so many people I'm meeting today at this conference that are doing incredibly wonderful work in the offset category, but this is having community benefit, local benefit. It's substantially improving lives and livelihoods, and those are the types of offsets that we want to be about and for.
I'm sure my colleague Akshat Rati could do an entire podcast with you about different categories of offsets.
You could take me to math camp on
exactly.
offsets, I'm sure.
Now, Gina, let's sort of talk about the elephant in the room. We have a major election coming up in November. I've heard. I live in London. I wasn't really aware of it, but I guess people are talking about it. We have been here before. Like, Trump is leading in the polls mostly. What should the climate community, if he wins, what are the, again, we've been here before, what are the tactics, what are the strategies that the climate community should be starting to think about?
Well, I think it's not just the climate community, obviously. We do have a big election coming up, and that election isn't just about climate, it's about democracy. It's about our freedom. That's what it's about. And so, I know that people will be challenged about who to vote for, but frankly, I know who not to. And that is the best thing that we can do.
But if it happens, again, we've been through this before 2016.
Yeah.
How at risk do you think the IRA is? Which parts of it could be vulnerable?
Yeah. I get asked that a lot, and I think one of the challenges, let me just say, during the last administration of President Trump, what happened was that subnational government stood up. What happened was states and mayors stood up. One of the reasons why I'm looking at America is All In at Bloomberg as a good place to be is that we're continuing to arm mayors and governors with information on how to access the Inflation Reduction Act money so that they can grow in their communities, but also as a line of defense. If anyone starts chipping away at the federal government and its authority, we still have layers below that can do things and move forward. But frankly, it's never going to replace a president who cares about the economy, who cares about its people, who doesn't simply look at themselves, who actually will govern instead of do transactions that benefit them. So we have to stop that from being a possibility moving forward and not have to just rely on mayors and governors to put their fingers in the dike. That's what we have to do. And I don't feel at all strongly about that.
I mean, one final question on that. I guess it's the, sort of the key question. You know Joe Biden. You've worked with Joe Biden.
I do.
Do you think he should run again?
I think he should, honestly, what he's doing right now, and I think what he's been talking about, is he's really looking at that issue. And I think he's a good man who's done extraordinary work. This is going to be the climate president. Yeah. And looking back, I'm going to wait and see what his final decision is, and I'll stand by him in terms of what that decision looks like.
Okay. Sage, this is, as we heard, a consequential election on many, many, many different levels. How do you think younger people are engaging with this, are thinking about this? You know, we have two very old presidents who, you know, don't look anything like sort of, you know, the younger generation. Is that turning people off, do you think?
Yeah, it is turning people off. I think I mean, you all know this is the most polarized we've ever been. I think I feel more encouraged by more and more people are considering running for office, running for the House, for the Senate, for local elections, because as we saw with Trump's last presidency, the presidency actually has way more power than I think most of us realize. There are fewer checks and balances than we realize. But that being said, you know, so much of what a president is able to do is limited by whether or not Congress agrees with them. And so we're looking and we're seeing, yeah, there's, you know, very, very, very elderly people. This is a very wealthy, white, you know, career politician Congress. And we don't feel represented with our interests, with our pain points. So I think seeing more people take this as kind of a radicalizing point and be more interested in local politics and also in, you know, new innovation in the private sector, new corporations coming up. I'm more interested in seeing new companies come out that are going to completely challenge the paradigm rather than looking at how to reform the existing one. And I think that also reflects with the public sector.
And who do you admire? Are there any particular companies you admire right now who are trying to do that?
Blueland.
Who are they?
Blueland is owned by a woman, or the CEO is a woman named Sarah Yu. She founded it, and it is a cradle-to-cradle certified cleaning company, and their products are a tablet. It's $2, so it's super affordable, and you put the tablet in the water, and it turns into a full bottle of cleaning. I love it because it's like fully natural. It eliminates the packaging. It eliminates the transportation waste. It's a really innovative model, and these are kinds of things like I'm trying to take this concept and see how we can translate that into, you know, okay, so this is a revolutionary idea. How do we transition this into other, you know, like how do we take this mentality and transition it into other, it's just like, it's really refreshing to see, like, instead of trying to fix that whole system, someone just went back to the drawing board and started something completely new, right? Yeah. And so I think I'd like to see more of that fresh energy in politics, in the private sector, everywhere.
Going back to the drawing board and starting from scratch and building anew.
Just a completely new, innovative idea.
Thank you very much. We're out of time. Thank you.
Wow.